a deadly tree with an equally deadly punch, a support who can pilot her own allies, a juggernaut that can push and pull his enemies on a whim, and a desert soldier who messes with the minds of his foes. Learn all about these heroes and more in this edition of the original Heroes of Newerth. By popular demand, this right here is the terrifying timber known as Deadwood. Deadwood is a melee strength hero on the Hellborn side who specializes in ganking and initiating fights. This wooden warrior looks like the gnarled remains of a tree, with a haunting face etched into the rotten lumber. The twisted bark across his appendages makes him look ghostly, while this is juxtaposed by his very sturdy frame and massive stumps that he has for hands. His lore offers an interesting look into the world of Newerth, as it brings up the concept of the Keeper of the Forest, who happens to be another hero in the game. Very briefly to provide context, Keeper of the Forest is a port of Treant Protector who was created before Deadwood, and his role in the world is simply to act as a lord to the forest and lush land of Newerth. I only bring this up because Deadwood's lore states that he was born of the cruelly tainted lands of Newerth. Deadwood is the undead husk of the first Keeper of the Forest. All around him, living things wilt, and he has little hesitation to destroy trees or use them as weapons. Despite seeking the destruction of Newerth, he still commands the incredible strength and natural powers of a forest guardian, thus combining the cruelty of the Hellborn with the powers that once belonged only to the Beast Horde. Really cool world building here, and it creates a natural opposing force to the Keeper of the Forest, so I like it a lot. His voice work is similar to most tree people you see in fiction. He speaks really slowly, with prominent creaking featured throughout his lines, and he's characterized as no-nonsense and highly hostile to his foes.
I have awoken. Root them down. You shall be defoliated. They won't forget me.
A fun Easter egg happened on April Fool's Day of 2011, where if you picked Deadwood, the announcer would yell out,
"It's Log! Log!"
in reference to the famous Ren and Stimpy sketch about a log. The deciduous deceased one's first spell is Rotten Grasp. Deadwood can target the ground, and after a short delay, he'll spawn roots in a small radius, affecting enemies who are in the area or any who walk through. The foes will be immobilized for 3 seconds, lose 4 armor, and take 250 physical damage over the course of the root effect. They'll also be slowly pushed toward the center of the AoE, which doesn't really come up all too often, but it looks spooky. This ability has a little bit of everything you need: crowd control, a debuff, and some damage to boot. It's particularly useful in ganking situations, although it does require some setup if you want to land it properly. Lucky for you, he's got exactly what you're looking for in Uproot. This is a 2-part ability. The first one can be cast at any time, and will arm Deadwood with a tree after a brief delay, granting him extra damage for 4 attacks. The second part of the spell is called Oak Bolt. Deadwood can activate this to throw a tree he currently has in hand to deal physical damage equal to his attack damage and apply a tapering 75% slow to his victim. Additionally, the spell will automatically be used on your 4th attack if you're currently holding a tree. It gives him a solid presence during the laning stage, and you certainly wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of his buffed auto attacks. The Oak Bolt portion of the spell is nice for catching a runaway enemy, but the real value is in the slow, as you can guess. At max level, the duration is long enough to where you can more comfortably set up your Rotten Grasp and pound your target into compost. For Deadwood's third ability, we have Clear Cutting. This grants Deadwood an additional 75 movement speed for 10 seconds, and it also lets him destroy trees that he walks over. If he does, he'll gain another burst of 75 movement speed as well as 100% slow resistance for a couple of seconds. Being a melee hero, this is great for catching up to wall up an enemy, but the fact that it lets you essentially walk straight through the tree line makes Deadwood an amazing ganker. Whereas most heroes have to worry about defined paths, Deadwood throws all caution to the wind and carves his own, and he gets rewarded for doing so. Deadwood's ultimate is Willowmaker. This is a single target spell that, without question, pulverizes your victim. You first gain 40% of their strength for 7 seconds, or 30 seconds if you have a Staff of the Master. You then deal 600 physical damage, plus 40% of the target's strength. As if that's not enough, they're also afflicted with a 1.5 second stun and a tapering slow for 5 seconds. Like geez, talk about devastating. It's commonly used as an initiation tool, but assuming that the enemy survives the initial burst of damage, they've also got to worry about the slow, the follow-up attacks, and an immobilization. So yeah, it's usually a death sentence, and it has a great animation that has debris getting jettisoned out from your punching bag for that extra bit of spice. With Deadwood, the early to mid game is the most important, as you'll want to take advantage of his ganking potential to snowball early on. Getting a point right away into Uproot will make your life easier while farming, but prioritizing Rotten Grasp will be your goal. For items, a Blood Chalice is every ganker's best friend, and you'll easily gain charges whenever you go hunting for an out-of-position enemy, but a Portal Key will be your first big purchase to catch the enemy by surprise. Or if you care more about fun, an Assassin's Shroud is cool too. Once you gain some momentum, you'll either want to pick up a Shield Breaker or Demonic Breastplate to maximize your physical damage, while a Nullstone and Shrunken Head can keep you safe from any pesky supports trying to get in your way. Deadwood was a fun proactive hero and easily a fan favorite even back when he was first released. Something about the aggressive gameplay made him a blast to play, especially when you're mowing down the terrain to make a beeline towards your target. Wrap it all up with a huge Falcon Punch style ultimate, and you've got yourself a recipe for the most memorable kills you'll ever get in these kinds of games. Just remember, when dealing with this cadaverous plant, if you leave him alone, you're just asking to get ambushed. You don't have to understand my feelings to know that this is Empath. Empath is a Legion intelligence hero who primarily supports her team by keeping them alive and pairs well with hard physical carries. Her design has a good chance of getting me demonetized, so I'll try to be brief here. Her overall look is reminiscent of a cleric or white mage style character with a green color scheme, emphasizing her connection to healing. The design actually reminds me a lot of the typical female armor in video games trope, where the pieces accentuate her physical attractiveness over functioning properly, and it's more of a sign of the times than anything. Her story keeps it short and simple. She seems to be a caring person who wants to fight on the side of good. Tied to the life force of all creatures that move across the lands of Newerth, the Empath has suffered greatly in the war against the Daemons. Nevertheless, her gift and curse is a powerful asset for the Legion, for the Empath is able to call on her magic to heal allies, weaken foes, and even merge her essence with other heroes. Something that I do appreciate in a weird way is that her overly sexualized appearance carries over into her voice lines. It seems like the intention was to make a hot character, and the developers didn't back down. Although, whether that's something to be admired is up in the air. Her breath is sultry, and she has a good number of innuendo, and I encourage you to look them up if you're interested, but here are the more YouTube-friendly ones.
I sense their fears, per your desires. We are as one. Your thoughts are impure. Yes, I know, mine are better than Ophelia's.
Like Deadwood, Empath also had an Easter egg during April Fools, where upon picking her, the announcer would say,
Every time we touch, I get this feeling.
Which is a reference to Cascada's Every Time We Touch, which was a banger back then, and it's a banger now. This could be alluding to Empath's skill set, which involves her getting literally inside of an ally, or maybe that Cascada and Empath are both blonde women. Either way, it's a good opportunity to remind you that the song exists, so I'm happy with it. Let's start this one off with Essence Link. This spell targets an enemy unit and tethers to them for 5 seconds, dealing true damage per second while healing Empath for the same amount. If the unit walks 200 units away from your max cast range, the tether will break, applying a 2.5 second stun to the target. Essence Link offers your opponents 2 choices. Do they want to take damage, or do they want to get stunned? A decision that you'll have to exploit in order to use the spell effectively. This also offers Empath a fun harassing tool that keeps her healthy in lane, which is very much needed given her tiny health pool. Empath's next ability is Illusory Veil. This is a target vector skill, which creates a wall in the direction that you drag your mouse. The wall blocks enemy movement and deals 60 magic damage per second to enemies who stand nearby. The damage here is fairly incidental, and it's most useful for blocking an escape route. It might be hard to predict the enemy movement, so be sure to start off with Essence Link, stun the enemy, and then set up the Illusory Veil directly in front of them to maximize the value out of the spell. Up next is Synergy. This is a passive global aura that grants health regeneration to all allied heroes, providing 4 HP plus 0.4% of their max health as regen per second. Nothing much to say here. This is one of those spells where the usefulness changes depending on how the rest of the team is doing. If everyone's struggling, it could be nice to forgo one of your other basic spells to pick this up. But yeah, what else can you say about it really? Empath's ultimate is As One. This causes Empath to jump into an allied hero, essentially becoming their stand for 30 seconds. While inside of the host, the bonded unit gains 60 attack speed and 75 attack damage, and Empath can use her other spells and some items like normal. The difference is Essence Link will grant the health gain directly to her ally, and she gains the sub-ability Faster. This spell is on a 5-second cooldown, and it grants her buddy a burst of movement speed for 2 seconds, so something like a cracked out Ghost Marchers. With the Staff of the Masters, this spell is renamed to Together as One, and it reduces the cooldown to 30 seconds, giving it 100% uptime. And it'll also grant your host their Staff of the Masters upgrade if they don't have the item themselves. With this spell, there's a lot of comparisons to League of Legends' Yuumi, who also basically lives inside of their hard carry. You unfortunately have to rely on your allies being competent, which I'm sure we all know is kind of a coin toss. All you can do is your best, and this ultimate can at the very least keep your allies alive, or even accelerate their farm for a while. This spell makes Empath the ultimate support, as you grant your carries all the tools in the world to succeed at their job, and it's up to you to keep up your composure if they don't. Empath is one of the most pure support heroes in the game, with spells that make it difficult to clear waves, so if you plan on picking her, there's no choice. You've gotta help your team. For that reason, you'll want to max Essence Link first, as it heals, does damage, and stuns all in one. What more could you ask for? The other spells, like I mentioned earlier, are based on how your team is doing, so much like her namesake, you'll have to feel the flow of the game and pick accordingly. For items, you're looking at the standard Sorcery Boots and Astrolabe to keep your allies' health and mana topped off. A Staff of the Masters is a must to make full use of her ultimate, so you'll have to slowly pick up those items whenever you can. If you have the luxury of getting other items, you can either go for traditional support items or auras to buff your team while you're invulnerable with As 1. Tablet of Command and Storm Spirit are my picks to start off, but you can also get Abyssal Skull for the lifesteal, Demonic Breastplate for the attack speed, or hell, even Mock of Brilliance to turn your carry into a force of nature. I think Empath represents the support role incredibly well, since her tools force you to not play selfishly, even if you wanted to. Honestly, there's no reason to play her in a pub game if you can avoid it, and she's really at her best when you can play with a friend that you can communicate with. Io in Dota 2 kind of performs a similar role, but nothing quite satisfies the itch of hopping into your friend like a mech and instructing them to wreak havoc across the map. With a little bit of patience, you too could be on the Empath to victory. I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation, because I'm gonna talk about Flux. Flux is a melee strength hero on the Legion side, whose entire kit revolves around repositioning the enemy team. The character is a man encased in high-tech, yet rustic armor, with a helmet that looks a lot like the Juggernaut's. The blocky silhouette suggests that he's a big dude, but the glowing lights on his body show that he's dependent on technology to dish out the pain. His background is a succinct paragraph that explains his origin and how he came across his iconic armor. The Legionnaire spent years entrapped within the earth, tortured by his captors. Thrashed about by gravity itself, he became infused with its strength. Slowly, he built himself a suit of the hardest metals known to man, tempering away for years as he honed its infernal machinery in secret. As he soldered the final plate onto himself, he emerged neither man nor machine, but a force of nature itself. Given the time frame, Flux's lore seems to be a reference to the 2008 Iron Man movie, and it looks like they built this story in a cave, with a box of scraps. His voice responses are pretty cool, if not a bit generic. Despite being a normal Legionnaire in the story, Flux is 100% robotic in his lines, with a massive filter on top of it that reminds me a lot of StarCraft's Goliath units.
No aside, no escape. Straight ahead. Get over here. I'm the Fluxernaut, bitch.
Flux is a strange one, and will have to start with his third ability, Polarity Swap. He starts the game off with the spell learned, and it's the core of his gimmick. Polarity Swap passively adds attack range to Flux, as well as increasing the cast range of one of his other basic abilities, Magnetic Surge. Activating this causes Flux to change his polarity, switching between Pull Polarity, where he's blue, or Push Polarity, where he's pink. This doesn't do anything on its own, but I'll explain the rest as I go. Speaking of which, Flux's first skill is Release. This causes Flux to release an AoE charged wave around him that deals magic damage and applies a 45% slow. If you're in pull mode, enemies affected will take 10% more damage during the slow duration, while push mode will cause the enemy to deal 10% less damage. A pretty solid slow on its own, this spell also demonstrates the versatility that Flux has when dealing with enemies, while highlighting the importance of knowing which polarity to be in. If you're engaging on someone, pull will make the kill more of a reality, while push is meant to deter the enemies from continuing the chase. Not only that, but it's a nice farming skill that lets you get closer to your core items. Flux's W is Magnetic Surge. This is a single target spell that can either push or pull a target up to 350 units, while also dealing damage equal to your attack plus 120% of your strength. You can also auto-cast this ability so you don't have to think all the time. A fairly spammable displacement effect on a 4-second cooldown, Magnetic Surge can reposition your enemies by a great deal, dragging them towards you to set up a slow from release, or repelling them away in case they're getting a bit too frisky. Again, the key to getting the most out of this spell is to know which polarity mode to be in, as well as manipulating your own position with Portal Key or Tablet of Command to get in just the right spot to disrupt the enemy. It doesn't sound like it does much on paper, I know, but even a little nudge can make all the difference in a teamfight. Flux's ultimate is Discharge. Activating this will cause all enemy heroes within a 2000 radius around Flux to either be pulled or pushed away relative to his position. Despite not doing any damage or any hard crowd control, Flux's ultimate can still have profound effects on the game. The pull effect can set up for large AoE teamfight abilities from your allies, such as Gladiator or Tempest. And the push effect can disengage while you focus on surviving. No matter how you use it, 800 distance is a lot of ground to cover, and it's more than likely going to put your enemies in a spot that they don't want to be. With the Staff of the Master, Discharge's radius becomes global, which means that you won't have to worry about exactly how far away someone is. If you want them, you're gonna get them. This also has the fun side effect of just slightly annoying a carry who's farming on the opposite side of the map. It's not gonna change their life at all, but I can't help but love minorly inconveniencing an enemy. Given that Flux's main strength is in displacing his enemies, he should generally focus on positioning, disruption, and survivability. That's why Portal Key is easily the most important item for his builds. It lets you get in the right spot to cause havoc, plus it meshes well with release. A Storm Spirit is good for the movement speed, mana regeneration, and an active that prevents the enemy from just teleporting away, while a Frostwolf Skull is good to continuously slow down a target, and provide you a good array of stats while you're at it. As always, if you can afford it, Kodra's Sheepstick is a great luxury item that can elevate Flux to a truly scary level. Flux is one of those hero designs who you never forget and always hope to see again one day, and honestly, he's one of the heroes who inspired this series of videos. It's amazing to see a hero based around such an abstract concept. Whereas other heroes deal damage or crowd control, Flux messes with positioning, and even without a hard stun, he's just as effective as someone who can hold you down. If you're someone who hates this guy because of how much he's messed you up, you can either deal with it or shut the Flux up. Now, don't desert me just yet. We still have to talk about Nomad. Nomad is a melee agility hero from the Legion who's capable of dealing insane amounts of damage while confusing the enemy with his slippery spells. The Nomad is a warrior from the desert, as indicated by the stream of sand that flows from his body, and clothing that covers most of his skin from the harsh sun of the terrain. His lore mostly serves to put over how great of a fighter he is. The battle-hardened hunter of 100 clashes first appeared on a dusky eve, a lone messenger and executioner to the Legion from vast desert wastes. Rumored to serve no one, and not unlike the very sandwraith he hunts, the Nomad's stern and offsetting demeanor has yet to gain him the trust of Legion soldiers. Nonetheless, his eagle-like reflexes and the swiftness with which he swings his gargantuan blade have made believers of heathens yet. Whoever worked on Nomad's voice lines deserved a promotion. They are the perfect hybrid of action movie badass, while still fitting in well with the fantasy setting. The one-liners are a bit generic. I mean, anyone can use them really, but the gruff voice acting really sells the character and his backstory.
My path is clear. I am the desert's sting. I'll take the fight to them. They will know no sanctuary. Do not fight if you have nothing to win.
Nomad's skills start off with Sandstorm. Upon activation, Nomad plays a fun little desert tune and covers himself and allies around him in a cloak of sand. This grants everyone invisibility and increased movement speed while slowing down enemies. Useful for catching up to your opposition, as well as potentially saving your allies, Sandstorm is a versatile spell that makes Nomad tricky to deal with if you're not prepared for it. For mind games, you can use Sandstorm to gank a lane and play with your opponent's heads, as they'll have to guess if it's just Nomad coming in or the whole squad. The Sand Soldier's second ability is a two-parter. Upon leveling it up, you get both Mirage Strike and True Strike. Mirage Strike will stealth Nomad while sending out an illusion to attack a target enemy, dealing 1 strike with bonus damage before dissipating. Meanwhile, True Strike will have Nomad charge at a target, attacking the enemy with bonus damage and granting a burst of attack speed for 3 seconds. Do note that these 2 spells share a cooldown, but they'll both get refreshed if you're within 500 units of an enemy hero dying. This pair of spells only contribute to Nomad's overall trickiness. From the enemy's point of view, they can't tell which spell you're using, so they have to take a wild guess as a charging Nomad comes throttling at them at top speed. Whereas True Strike is mostly used offensively, Mirage Strike can allow Nomad to escape from a nasty situation while his illusion chips away at his foes. Knowing the ins and outs of these abilities is the key to mastering Nomad, as you'll be able to mess up your opponents through sheer confusion. Nomad's third ability is a passive named Wanderer. This gains charges as Nomad walks, to a maximum of 100 charges. If he has at least 20, the next attack will consume all of them, and it'll deal a critical strike based on the number of charges, up to 2.2 times at max level. If you have less than 20 charges, attacking will add an additional 25, so you can ramp up the damage on a single unit if they happen to be immobilized. Wanderer encourages moving around the lane in order to build up charges, so that you can hit a creep or enemy hero for extra damage. And naturally, this makes Nomad have a very engaging playstyle. There's never a dull moment as you're constantly clicking around to make sure that your next attack is gonna sting. The passive also has nice synergy with his other basic abilities, as they allow him to cover some distance and build up to a nice beefy crit. Nomad's ultimate is Edge Counter. Activating this causes Nomad to enter into the counter state for 1 second, where he becomes immobilized. The first instance of damage, or target from an ability or item, will become nullified. You'll then remove any debuff or stun, and counter with a huge shockwave towards the hero. The resulting shockwave deals magic damage and stuns any enemy caught in its massive wake. As a bonus, Nomad will also gain 20% damage reduction for the next 5 seconds because why not? Edge Counter is a classic parry ability, forcing you to predict your enemy's next move, and rewarding you greatly for doing so successfully. It's natural as a melee carry that people will have their sights set on Nomad, and the fact that he likes to get in the middle of a skirmish makes him so much more vulnerable. His ultimate allows him to turn lemons into lemonade, and a well-intentioned but mistimed attack could spell doom for the entire enemy team. Nomad is one of the hardest carries by design, so say it with me, you need magic immunity. Shrunken Head is your best friend, and it'll let you live long enough to actually deal damage. To maximize on his potential, you need to grab items with movement speed as well as on-hit effects, so Ghost Marchers and Twin Blades are great core items that don't cost too much, but provide a lot of what he needs. From there, Shield Breaker is a good early pickup and can be upgraded to stack its armor debuff, letting you kill squishy units much faster. I also like Brutalizer, especially since True Strike gives you that quick burst of attack speed to ensure its effect goes off. Now, if you're a big Dumbo like me, you can pick up a Nullfire Blade to burn your target's mana and keep them in place with the active slow. Then you can get the lightning items, Thunderclaw and Hyper Crown, to take advantage of the attack speed. This way, you'll be non-stop proccing the lightning effect in a build I call Operation Desert Storm, which is a pun so good that it has to be done every game. I think it's pretty obvious to see why Nomad was so beloved in his time. Combine high DPS with spells that can outsmart your opponents, and you've got yourself a classic pub stomper. He does take some time to get online. His wave clear is pretty bad without Thunderclaw or Runed Cleaver, but once he does, it's just a matter of picking off your victims one at a time. With Han shutting down, I can only lament as the loss of Nomad will just make me so sad. And that's another batch of the Heroes of Newerth. Who would you like to see next? Be sure to let me know. And while I have you, be sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. Support the channel by becoming a member or donating on Patreon. And don't forget, I'll see you soon.